Hi, everyone. Jim Wirtz here, contributing editor for the Erie Reader and eriereader.com. We're here today to have a conversation about food in this time of crisis. It is something that that is on everyone's mind, and I think I see a lot of posts about supermarkets and shopping for food and what's available on social media. And I think that we can get caught up in a lot of the noise in big media. And so we wanted to talk to an expert. Not only did we find an expert, but we found an Erie native as well. CaitlinWelsh joins me today, and she is the Director of Global Food Security for the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. The CSIS is a bipartisan nonprofit policy research organization dedicated to advancing practical ideas to address the world's greatest challenges. I apologize for my tongue-tiedness here at the lunch hour, Caitlin, but I do appreciate you taking some time to join me today and to help unpack some of this for the folks of Erie and the Erie Reader audience.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Jim. Pleasure to be here.
Well, let's kind of get right down to the what's at the core of what we're talking about, and that's food insecurity. It seems that food insecurity is a persistent issue in the United States. It's a generational problem, and for many Americans, it certainly has become more pronounced in times like these. For those who might be unfamiliar with the term and what food insecurity is, can you talk about that, unpack that for us, and maybe also how it's been or being reframed in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sure. So food security in general is the ability of a person to meet his or her nutritional needs so they can have an active and productive lifestyle. The technical definition is a little bit broader than that. It hits on availability of food, access to food, the nutritional quality of food, and the stability of those things over time. But a general definition is just the ability of someone to meet their nutritional needs to match an active lifestyle. In this country, too large a segment of our population has been food insecure for a long time. Right now, that number is really increasing. Last week, as we all know, 3.5 million people, largest number ever in our country's history, filing for unemployment benefits in 1 week. So that's going to increase the number of people who are experiencing food insecurity in our own country. I'll tell you one thing that's interesting is that the issues that my program generally deals with they're about food insecurity in globally. So it's typically in developing countries. Right now, we're seeing a large increase in interest in food insecurity in our own country. So that's why we've been doing some work on this issue.
And are you seeing or hearing more about folks struggling with food insecurity? Certainly, you talked about the rising unemployment. Are there additional elements of this health crisis that are kind of exacerbating food insecurity?
I think so. I think in the sense that, let's see, people who have pre-existing health conditions who can't access proper nutrition right now they themselves are more susceptible to contracting COVID-19. So you're seeing an overlay of nutrition and health issues right now. But overall in our country, what I'm seeing is that, number one, yes, you have a greater number of people who are food insecure. And then on top of that, all Americans are aware of this issue just because when we go grocery shopping, we're seeing what shelves look like, and we're seeing what the long lines at stores.
Speaking of those shelves and the long lines, one item on the shelves that has kind of put stockpiling in perspective for everyone has been the absence of and availability of toilet paper, a non-food item, but an important item nonetheless. And I think that made some people concerned that the stockpiling of toilet paper was going to lead to the stockpiling of food items as well. What should people be thinking about as they head into the stores? How much food should people be buying? And what should they be trying to keep on hand in their house, just to, one, be responsible and take care of their families, but two, to make sure that they leave something out in the stores for other people as well?
Yeah, yeah. A couple of things. I think first of all, when you go to grocery stores, again, you're seeing empty shelves. An experience this week where we had to go to 3 grocery stores before we found eggs, where I live in Northern Virginia. Um, our automatic reaction to that can be to think that there's a shortage of supply. But everything that we're hearing from industry is that it's not the case that there's supply shortages, because supply chains remain strong in our country. What's going on right now is an increase in demand. You're just seeing spikes in demand that grocery stores are not used to dealing with. And it's simply because of those spikes in demand that you're seeing, again, empty shelves and long lines. So one thing that we all can do as consumers in this situation is to stock our pantries for shorter amounts of time. So stock your pantries for 1 or 2 weeks maximum. You don't need to go out there and shop for a whole month or 2 months. So shop for what you need. Again, 1 week or 2 weeks. And then consider buying foods that are shelf stable, that will remain in your pantry for a while, or in your freezer. So that's going to be a lot of canned foods, canned fruits and vegetables and meats. Same thing for frozen foods, dried beans, things like that. So consider buying foods that are going to last longer. Of course, fresh foods provide high nutritional content. So when you do purchase those as you need them, and eat them quickly so that they don't go to waste in your refrigerator.
I know for me, one of the most reassuring things to do when I do head out to the grocery store, if I do have concerns about an item or the availability of an item, is just to talk to someone in the grocery store, to talk about when the next truck is coming in, or when that shipment, whether it's meat or eggs or dairy, is going to be coming into the store.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to get their own perspective, just because they've been there for a while and they can see, they know that supplies are coming. But that does relate to another issue, which is keeping the safety of grocery store employees in mind. Because if you think about it, you will encounter one employee or just a handful of them in your own trip, but they're encountering hundreds in a day, and so they're more susceptible than we are to contracting the virus through those interactions. So I like to keep in mind to keep my 6 feet of distance when I'm having those conversations.
Absolutely. And you raise a valid point too. There are folks working throughout the community in a number of industries that we interact with, whether we're going to pick up takeout or whether we have to go to a pharmacy or something. And it is important to keep in mind that those folks are interacting with a great number of people, and we want to work to keep them safe as well. So I appreciate you bringing that up. You talk about the importance of having fresh food in the diet and getting fresh food as you need it. Should people be taking any precautions with fresh food or produce as they bring them into their house, or doing anything differently to either store them or prepare them when they get them?
When it comes to fresh foods, not necessarily. I would say make sure you wash everything, though. I think I'm hoping that would be a habit in normal times, but I think right now, particularly, anecdotally, I'm finding, for example, that when we eat oranges or avocados and things, we're much more deliberate about making sure that we wash those before we eat them. But I'll extend this beyond fresh fruits and vegetables to packaged foods, because the virus can last on hard surfaces for up to 72 hours. It hasn't been recommended specifically by the CDC yet, but I think it's not a bad idea to wipe down the surfaces of products when you bring them into your home, just to disinfect those before you put them in the pantry.
Dr. Anthony Fauci just had that conversation with Trevor Noah in the last day or two here, and he recommended the same thing. Certainly, we want to be conscientious about washing our hands and not shaking hands and doing all of those things. And that packaged items were not a major concern, but if it makes you feel better, that it's not a bad idea to wipe them down. Absolutely. As you mentioned earlier, we're facing record unemployment, not only here in Pennsylvania, but nationwide. Many Americans are facing new financial hardships. Those folks that were previously experiencing financial hardships are having an even more difficult time. When folks are going to the store, probably now more than ever, they're making a grocery budget and trying to stay within that budget. Do you have any tips for making that food budget stretch a little bit?
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned, just writing things down. So before you leave the house to go to the grocery store, think about what your needs are going to be for the coming week, and shop for those things. If you can't find the items that you're planning to eat, then look for substitutes. But it's easy to get distracted when you don't have a list. So I think sticking to a list is a good idea. And the same recommendations for keeping the pantry stocked for a long time are the ones that I would give for shopping on a budget. Simply to shop for dried foods, and canned foods as well.
When people go to the store, now that we're really reading labels and paying attention to prices and things, there are labels on those price tags that say WIC on them, and those are items that are approved for people who are enrolled in the WIC program, otherwise known as food stamps, folks that are getting subsidies, and I've seen a lot of folks on social media talking about consumers needing to be more conscientious about what's on the shelves, and needing to look at those tags. And if there are multiple items out there, to choose, if you can, a non-WIC item, to leave those WIC available items there for the folks who are restricted in what they purchase at the grocery store. I just wanted to get some validation on this, because you never know when you see things like this on social media. It seemed like a good idea, but I hadn't previously heard about or thought about this until my last trip to the store. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the first that I've heard of this phenomenon, but I think it's a fantastic idea. I will back up and say that the Families First Act that was passed in the Senate, we hope the House will pass it soon. But that act allows USDA to grant waivers to states so that, for example, when someone is shopping for a WIC approved bread, if that bread is not available, they'd be able to substitute that item with a non-WIC approved bread. So the act would allow for those waivers state by state. Hopefully, all states would request those waivers. The thing is, though, you just don't know how long that's gonna flow down to actual customers. It could be a matter of weeks before that affects customers. So I think that the idea of if you're someone who has options in terms of what you're able to buy, taking the non-WIC item and leaving WIC for someone who's shopping with those benefits is a fantastic idea.
From a policy standpoint and an advocacy standpoint, are you or your organization advocating for a broader inclusion, a list for WIC and other benefit programs?
So CSIS is not an advocacy organization per se, but the public service that we're doing right now is getting information out to all Americans, consumers right now, about nutrition, food safety, everything having to do with food security in our country.
In preparing to have this conversation with you today, it became known to me, at least, that food prices were already on the rise heading into 2020, and that it had actually been a pretty steep increase from February 2019 to February of 2020. Are rising prices an additional concern people need to think about right now with relation to the pandemic and kind of the uncertainty about how long this might all last?
Yeah, in the short term, I don't think so. And I think that if we were to see food price increases, it wouldn't be because of overbuying and pantry stocking in our own grocery stores. If it were to happen, it would be because of the behavior of other countries around the world, exporting countries in particular. You're seeing some countries fearful of food insecurity domestically, and they're erecting export bans of their own products. So Vietnam just put in place an export ban of rice that's produced in Vietnam, so they can't export rice. They want to keep it for domestic consumers. Kazakhstan did the same thing with a number of agricultural products. We're aware of that. When food prices spiked in 2007 to 2008, it was largely because of political actions such as that. The global food security community is highly aware that bans such as that are detrimental for global food prices and for food security around the world. So I think that you're going to see a lot more press about that if countries decide to go in that direction, and lots of pressure, lots of diplomatic pressure put on those countries that are erecting export bans.
Just a moment ago, you mentioned the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Um, i- are there any particular points in addition to what you've already mentioned, related to the act, related to the stimulus, and trying to make sure that Americans are taken care of in this time of need?
Yeah.
Are there any key points in this that you think people need to know about, that we should be paying attention to?
I think there's some fairly significant action that's allowed under the act. For example, that households that receive SNAP benefits are going to be allowed to request the maximum amount, if they're not already receiving it, each month during the pandemic. So I think that I'm pleased to see that the federal government is recognizing that food insecurity is a big risk for us right now, at a broad scale. I will say, though, that economic recovery won't happen in a broad sense until the pandemic is behind us. And all the things that we're doing right now, social distancing, washing our hands, all those actions, ultimately those things are going to contribute to our economic recovery. So it's not only for our own health, but it's for the health of everyone around us and our own economy. So I think that those things are related, and wouldn't necessarily think so normally, but when you're taking care of your own health, it's for the good of our own country and our economy and food security.
Caitlin, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you're getting a lot of media requests to talk about this important topic, and I'm grateful that you took a couple of minutes to discuss it with me and the Erie Reader and our audience. So
Okay.
next time you're back on an Erie stage, Caitlin is a veteran presenter from the Jefferson Educational Society Global Summit. So if we get a chance to see you back here on the Erie stage, we'll be sure to say hello, and I hope that our audience follows you and your guidance here in this important time.
Good. Thank you. Look forward to seeing everyone in person as soon as we're able to travel again.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Stay well.
Take care.
Bye-bye.